The dust kicked up in choking clouds as Willa Lane stumbled onto the auction platform, her wrists bound with coarse rope that had already rubbed her skin raw, and she knew this moment would either destroy her completely or somehow set her free in ways she could not yet imagine. The year was 1877, and Saint Elmo, Colorado, had seen its share of hardship and cruelty. But nothing quite prepared Willa for standing on that wooden platform in the center of town, while men shouted numbers like she was livestock. Her father's debts had caught up with him, and when consumption took him 3 weeks prior, the creditors came calling. They said she could work it off or be sold to cover what was owed. She had tried to work, scrubbing floors at the saloon until her hands bled, but the debt was too large and the interest kept climbing. So here she stood, 20 years old with auburn hair hanging limp around her shoulders, wearing a dress that had seen better days, while strange men evaluated her like a horse at market. "Do I hear 200? The auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the crowd that had gathered. Some came out of genuine interest, others for the spectacle. Willa kept her eyes fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to look at any of them. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. 200, someone called from the back. 250, another voice joined in. Willa's stomach turned. The voices blurred together, numbers climbing higher. She thought about running, but where would she go? She had no family left, no friends with means to help her, and the law was on the creditor's side. This was legal, they had assured her. Indentured servitude to pay her father's debts. 7 years of her life, sold to whoever wanted to pay. $500. The voice that cut through the chaos was different from the others. It was calm, steady, and came from a man who stepped forward from the crowd. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore dusty riding clothes and a black hat, and there was something in his bearing that made the other men step back slightly. 500, and that ends the bidding. The auctioneer looked stunned. That's mighty generous, mister. Do I hear 6? You do not, the cowboy said, his voice carrying an edge now. 500 is more than fair for any debt her father could have left. Take it or leave it. The creditor, a weaselly man named Silas Morton, practically tripped over himself to get to the platform. Sold. 500 to the gentleman. Willa finally looked at the man who had just purchased her future. He met her eyes with an expression she could not quite read. Not cruelty, not lust, but something else entirely. He approached the platform and pulled out a worn leather wallet, counting out bills with methodical precision. "Name's Ethan Jameson," he said to Morton, handing over the money. "I will take the paperwork now." Of course," Morton said, greedily counting the bills. He produced a document from his coat pocket. "Just sign here, and the girl is yours for 7 years of service." Ethan took the paper and read it carefully, his jaw working as he scanned the terms. Then he pulled a match from his pocket, struck it against his boot, and set the corner of the document on fire. "What are you doing?" Morton shrieked. "That's a legal document." "Was a legal document," Ethan corrected, dropping the burning paper to the dirt and crushing it under his boot. "I paid the debt. There is no service owed. The debt is settled in full." He turned to Willa then, and she saw his eyes were kind despite the hardness of his features. He reached up and began untying the rope around her wrists. His hands were gentle, careful not to hurt her already abraded skin. "Now you decide your own future, darling," he said quietly so only she could hear. "You do not owe me anything, not service, not gratitude, not even your time. You are free to go wherever you want." Willa stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "I do not understand." "It is simple enough," Ethan said, finishing with the ropes and tossing them aside. "That debt should never have fallen on you. Your father's mistakes were his own. I paid it because it was wrong what they were doing. but you do not owe me anything for it. You are your own person, free to make your own choices. But $500, Willa whispered. That is a fortune. It is money, Ethan said with a slight shrug. I have been saving for a long time, and I cannot think of a better way to spend it than buying someone's freedom. So what will you do, Miss Lane? Where will you go? The question hung in the air between them. Willa looked around at the crowd, at the town she had known her whole life. There was nothing left for her here. Her father was dead, their small house had been seized, and she had no prospects. She could try to find work, but her reputation was now tainted by having stood on that auction block. No respectable family would hire her. I have nowhere to go, she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. I have nothing. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then he said, I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here. It is not much, but I run cattle and have been doing well enough. I could use help with the cooking and household work if you are interested. I would pay fair wages, provide room and board, and you could leave whenever you wanted. No obligation, no debt. Just honest work for honest pay. Willa searched his face for any hint of deception or ulterior motive. She had seen enough of men to know when they wanted something from her. But Ethan's expression remained open, almost carefully neutral, like he was trying very hard not to influence her decision. Why would you do this? She asked. You do not know me. No, I do not, he agreed. But I know what it is like to have no choices. When I was younger, I was in a bad situation myself. Someone helped me when they did not have to, and it changed my life. I guess I am trying to pay that forward. There was a story there, Willa could tell, but he did not elaborate. She looked at the mountains again, then back at this stranger who had just paid a small fortune for her freedom and asked nothing in return. I can cook, she said finally, and clean. I am a hard worker. I do not doubt it, Ethan said. Is that a yes then? Yes, Willa said, the word feeling like jumping off a cliff. Yes, I will come work for you. Good, Ethan said, and she caught the briefest hint of a smile. My horse is over at the stable. Do you have anything you need to collect? No, Willa said. Everything I owned was seized to pay the debts. Something flashed in Ethan's eyes at that, anger perhaps, but he just nodded. Then we will stop by the general store on the way out of town. You will need proper clothes and supplies. I cannot ask you to buy me more things, Willa protested. You are not asking. I am offering, Ethan said. If you are going to work on a ranch, you need appropriate clothing. Consider it part of the job. Before Willa could argue further, he gently placed a hand on her back and guided her off the platform. The crowd parted for them, some people whispering, others looking disappointed that the show was over. Morton was still sputtering about the burned contract, but Ethan ignored him completely. The general store was run by a kindly older woman named Mrs. Peterson, who took one look at Willa's worn dress and clucked sympathetically. You poor dear. Let me help you find something suitable. Ethan waited near the door while Mrs. Peterson led Willa to the back of the store where the women's clothing was kept. That is a good man, Mrs. Peterson said quietly. Ethan Jameson is one of the most respected ranchers in these parts, works hard, treats people fair, minds his own business. You are fortunate he stepped in. I still do not understand why he did it, Willa admitted. Some people are just decent, child, Mrs. Peterson said, pulling out a sturdy cotton dress in a deep blue. Try this on, and you will need proper boots, undergarments, a coat for the mountain weather, and probably a split riding skirt if you are going to be on a ranch. By the time Willa emerged from the back room wearing the new blue dress and carrying a bundle of other clothes, Ethan had added various supplies to the counter. Flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, salt pork, and other staples. He looked up when she approached and nodded approvingly. That is much better. The blue suits you, he said simply, then turned to pay Mrs. Peterson. Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks at the compliment. She could not remember the last time anyone had said something kind about her appearance. Mrs. Peterson wrapped the additional clothes in brown paper and tied the bundle with string. Then Ethan collected everything and they headed to the stable. His horse was a magnificent sorrel gelding with a white blaze down its face. Ethan packed the supplies into saddlebags with practiced efficiency, then turned to Willa. "Have you ridden before?" he asked. "A few times, but not often," Willa admitted. "We will ride double then." "It is not ideal, but it is only 15 miles and Copper here can handle it," Ethan said, patting the horse's neck. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then reached down to help Willa up. She placed her foot in the stirrup he freed up for her and let him pull her up behind him. It felt strange to sit so close to a man she did not know, but there was no help for it. "Hold on," Ethan said, and Willa wrapped her arms around his waist. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Then he clicked his tongue and Copper started moving, carrying them out of Saint Elmo and toward the mountains. The ride took several hours, and Willa spent most of it watching the landscape change around them. They followed a rough trail that climbed steadily into the foothills, leaving behind the dusty streets of town for pine forests and rocky outcroppings. The air grew cooler and cleaner, filled with the scent of sage and wildflowers. It was beautiful in a way that made Willa's chest ache. She had spent so long trapped in town, caring for her dying father and worrying about money, that she had forgotten how big the world was. "The ranch is just over this next ridge," Ethan said, speaking for the first time since they had left town. His voice startled her. "Is it far from neighbors?" Willa asked. "The nearest ranch is about 10 miles east," Ethan said. "I like the solitude, but it can be lonely sometimes. I go into town every couple of weeks for supplies and to sell cattle. There is a line shack about 5 miles north where I stay during winter roundup, but mostly I am at the main house." They crested the ridge and Willa saw the ranch spread out below them. It was a modest but well-maintained property tucked into a small valley. The house was built of logs with a stone chimney, larger than a cabin but not quite a full ranch house. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance on the hillsides. "It is beautiful," Willa said without thinking. "It is home," Ethan said, and she heard the pride in his voice. He guided Copper down the slope toward the house. As they got closer, Willa noticed the details. The house had glass windows, a real luxury, and the door looked sturdy and well-fitted. The barn was in good repair, the fences were straight, and everything spoke of careful maintenance and hard work. This was not some hardscrabble operation barely getting by. Ethan had built something solid here. He stopped Copper in front of the house and dismounted, then helped Willa down. Her legs were unsteady after the long ride and she stumbled slightly. Ethan steadied her with a hand on her arm. "Take a moment," he said. "It has been a long day for you." That was an understatement. Just this morning Willa had woken up in a jail cell, knowing she was going to be sold. Now she was standing in front of a mountain ranch, free but uncertain about everything. Ethan unpacked the supplies from Copper's saddlebags and carried them toward the house. "Come on. I will show you around and you can get settled." The interior of the house was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. There was a simple wooden table with chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, shelves with books and supplies, and a stove for cooking. 2 doors led off the main room. "That one is my room," Ethan said, pointing to the door on the right. "The other is a guest room. You can have that one." "It is not much," Just a bed and a dresser, but it is private and yours for as long as you stay here." He opened the door to show her. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in quilts, a simple dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. After sleeping in a jail cell the night before, it looked like paradise to Willa. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching slightly. "You do not need to keep thanking me," Ethan said gently. "This is just basic decency. I will bring your things in, and then I need to tend to the animals. Take your time settling in. There is water in the pitcher on the dresser if you want to wash up. Supper will not be until later, so rest if you need to." He left her alone then, closing the door behind him. Willa stood in the center of the small room and felt something break open inside her. She sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming relief of being safe, of having a door she could close, of not being owned by anyone. She cried for her father, for the life she had lost, for the fear she had carried all day. But she also cried because a stranger had shown her kindness when he did not have to, and that made her believe that maybe the world was not entirely cruel. Eventually, the tears stopped. Willa washed her face in the cool water from the pitcher, changed out of the blue dress into one of the more practical work dresses Mrs. Peterson had selected, and emerged from her room. Through the window she could see Ethan in the corral, tending to the horses. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable with the work. Willa looked around the kitchen. It was clean, but clearly the domain of someone who cooked out of necessity rather than skill. The stove was well maintained, though, and she found the pantry stocked with basics. She unpacked the supplies Ethan had bought, putting everything in its proper place, then started investigating what she could make for supper. There were potatoes in a bin, onions, dried beef, and various staples. She found a heavy pot and started a stew, chopping vegetables and setting everything to simmer. It felt good to have something to do with her hands, something normal and productive. She was slicing bread when Ethan came in, bringing with him the smell of horses and fresh air. He stopped when he saw the activity in the kitchen. "You did not need to start working today," he said. "You should rest." "I needed to do something," Willa said honestly. "I cannot just sit idle, and you have done so much for me. Let me at least make supper." Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, thank you. That smells good already." He washed up at the basin, scrubbing the dirt from his hands and face, then hung his hat on a peg by the door. Without it, Willa could see his face more clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-bleached brown hair and lines around his eyes from squinting into the distance. He had a strong jaw and a nose that looked like it had been broken at least once. Not a handsome face in the conventional sense, but an honest one. "Tell me about the ranch," Willa said as she worked, needing to fill the silence. "How long have you been here?" "About 8 years, Ethan said, settling into one of the kitchen chairs. "I worked as a ranch hand for a long time, saving every penny. When this property came up for sale, I bought it and started building. It has been slow going, but I have about 200 head of cattle now, some good horses, and I turn a decent profit. Nothing fancy, but it is mine." "You built this yourself?" Willa asked, looking around with new appreciation. "Most of it. Had help with the heavy lifting, but yes. I wanted something that was truly mine that no one could take away," Ethan said. There was something in his tone that made Willa look at him more closely. "You said earlier that someone helped you when you were younger," she ventured. "What happened?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, and Willa worried she had overstepped, but then he started talking. "My father was a drunk and a gambler, lost everything we had and then some. When I was 16, he sold me to a work crew building the railroad. Said it was the only way to cover his debts. I spent 2 years essentially enslaved, working in conditions that should have killed me. But there was a foreman, a man named Jack Duffy, who saw what was happening. He paid off my contract, gave me a horse and some money, and told me to make something of myself. Said the best way to repay him was to help someone else someday. Willa stopped cutting bread and looked at him. "That is why you bought my contract." "That is why," Ethan confirmed. "When I saw what was happening in town, I remembered what it felt like to have no control over your own life. I had the money. It seemed like the right thing to do." "What happened to Jack Duffy?" Willa asked. "He died about 5 years ago. Mine collapsed up in Leadville. But I visited him before that, told him what I had made of myself. He was proud, I think," Ethan said, and there was sadness in his voice but also warmth. They were quiet for a moment, then Willa said, "I will make you proud too. I will work hard here." "You do not owe me that," Ethan said again. "But I appreciate the sentiment." Supper was ready soon after, and they ate at the table as the sun set behind the mountains. The stew was good, hearty and filling, and Ethan complimented her cooking with genuine appreciation. They talked a little more, mostly about the ranch and what the work would entail. Ethan explained that he usually rose before dawn to tend the animals, spent the day riding fence lines or moving cattle, and returned at dusk. Willa's work would primarily be maintaining the house, cooking and tending the kitchen garden that was currently overgrown and neglected. "I have not had time to keep up with it," Ethan admitted. "I am better with cattle than vegetables." "I can bring it back," Willa said. "My mother had a garden when I was young. I remember how she did it." After supper, Willa cleaned up while Ethan sat by the fire and read from a worn book. The domesticity of it was strange but comforting. When everything was put away, Willa found herself unsure what to do next. It was still early evening, not quite time for bed. "There are books on the shelf if you like to read," Ethan offered, noticing her hesitation. "Or you are welcome to just rest. There is no schedule you need to keep except your own." Willa selected a book, one of the novels she recognized, and settled into the rocking chair. For a while they simply sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. It was peaceful in a way Willa had not experienced in years. No creditors pounding on the door, no smell of sickness, no fear of what tomorrow would bring. Just quiet and warmth and safety. Eventually Ethan stood and banked the fire. "I rise early, so I am going to turn in. Sleep as late as you want. You have had an exhausting day." "Good night," Willa said. "And Ethan, thank you for everything." He paused at his door and looked back at her. "You are welcome. Sleep well, Willa." She stayed up a little longer, watching the embers glow in the fireplace and thinking about how drastically her life had changed in a single day. Then she went to her room, changed into the nightgown Mrs. Peterson had included in her purchases, and climbed into bed. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, the quilts soft and warm. Through the window she could see stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Willa fell asleep feeling something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both foreign and comforting to Willa. She woke each morning to the sound of Ethan moving around the house, the clink of the stove as he started coffee before heading out to the animals. The first few mornings she rushed to get up and help, feeling like she should be the one making breakfast, but Ethan waved her off. "I have been doing it this way for years," he said. "Take your time. There is no rush." But Willa could not stand to be idle. By the third morning she was up before him, coffee already brewing and breakfast started by the time he came in from the first round of chores. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. "You did not need to," he started. "I know I did not need to," Willa interrupted gently, "but I wanted to. Let me do this, Ethan." He relented with a small nod, and after that it became their routine. Willa rose early, made breakfast, and sent Ethan off to work with a full stomach. Then she would tackle the housework, which was considerable after years of bachelor living. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, organized the pantry, and began the process of bringing the kitchen garden back to life. The garden became her special project. The plot was about 30 feet square, surrounded by a fence to keep out deer and rabbits. It had been planted at some point but had gone to weeds and volunteer plants. Willa spent hours pulling weeds, turning soil, and salvaging what could be saved. There were potato plants that had gone wild, onions that had reseeded themselves, and a hardy patch of herbs that had survived neglect. She found seeds in the pantry and planted beans, squash, carrots, and lettuce. Ethan would return each evening dusty and tired to find supper ready and the house transformed bit by bit. At first, he seemed uncomfortable with the changes, like he was not sure he deserved such care. But gradually he relaxed into it, accepting the clean house and good meals as a new normal. They talked more during those evening meals. Willa learned that Ethan had been born in Missouri, but moved west after leaving that railroad work crew. He had worked ranches all over Colorado and Wyoming before settling here. He loved the mountains and the isolation, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. He read voraciously, ordering books from Denver, and had opinions on everything from politics to poetry. Willa shared her own story more slowly. Her mother had died when she was 12, leaving her to care for her father who had never quite recovered from the loss. He had been a clerk in Saint Elmo, respectable but not prosperous. After her mother's death, he started drinking and gambling, trying to fill the emptiness. The debts had piled up slowly, and then came the consumption. Willa had nursed him through the final months, watching him waste away while creditors circled like vultures. "I was so angry at him," she admitted one night, weeks into her stay at the ranch. "Even as I watched him die, I was angry that he left me with nothing but debt and shame." "What kind of daughter does that make me?" "A human one," Ethan said quietly. "We can love people and still be angry at the choices they made. Those feelings can exist together." Something in his tone made Willa ask, "Were you angry at your father?" "Furious," Ethan said. "Still am sometimes. He chose his vices over his family. That is hard to forgive. But I also learned something from it. I learned what kind of man I did not want to be." "And what kind of man is that?" Willa asked. "The kind who keeps his word, who takes responsibility for his own mistakes, who treats people with respect, especially those who depend on him," Ethan said. He looked at her across the table. "You are a good woman, Willa. What happened to you was not fair, but it does not define you. What you do next is what matters." His words struck something deep in Willa's chest. She had spent so long feeling powerless, defined by her father's failures and her own poverty. But here, on this mountain ranch, she was beginning to feel like herself again. Or maybe like a self she had never had the chance to be. As spring turned toward summer, the ranch flourished. The cattle thrived on the mounting grass, the horses were sleek and healthy, and Willa's garden began producing abundantly. She canned vegetables, baked bread, and kept the house running smoothly. Ethan taught her to ride properly, giving her one of the gentler mares to practice on. At first she was terrified, but gradually she gained confidence, and soon she was riding out to bring Ethan his lunch when he was working far pastures. Those rides became some of her favorite times. The mountains were spectacular in summer, wildflowers covering the meadows in riots of color. She would find Ethan mending fence or moving cattle, and they would sit together in the shade of a pine tree and eat the lunch she had packed. He would point out landmarks, tell her the names of the peaks, show her where the best fishing spots were in the creek that ran through the property. One afternoon, about 2 months after Willa had arrived at the ranch, they were sitting on a hillside overlooking the valley. The cattle were grazing peacefully below, and the sound of the creek was a distant murmur. "I never thanked you properly," Willa said suddenly, "for what you did in town. I was too shocked and overwhelmed, but I want you to know how much it meant. You gave me my life back." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. "I did what any decent person should have done. But most people would not have," Willa said. "They walked by that auction without a second thought. You stopped and helped someone you did not know. That matters, Ethan. You matter." He turned to look at her then, and there was something in his eyes that made Willa's breath catch, an intensity she had not seen before. "You matter too," he said quietly, "more than you know." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Willa could not quite name. Then Ethan stood abruptly and offered her his hand. "We should head back. Looks like rain moving in." Willa took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, but she felt the shift between them. Something had changed, though she was not sure what exactly. They rode back to the ranch together, Willa on her mare and Ethan on Copper, and she kept glancing at him from the corner of her eye. He sat tall in the saddle, his profile strong against the sky, and she found herself noticing things she had not before. The way his hands were both strong and gentle, the rare but genuine smile that transformed his serious face, the careful consideration he gave to everything he did. She was developing feelings for him. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt as they unsaddled the horses in the barn. She had been so focused on survival and gratitude that she had not recognized the warmth in her chest for what it was. But now, watching Ethan brush down Copper with methodical strokes, she could not deny it. She was falling in love with the cowboy who had saved her. The thought terrified her. She was living in his house, dependent on him for work and shelter. Any romantic feelings would complicate everything. And why would he be interested in her anyway? He had made it clear from the beginning that she owed him nothing, that their arrangement was simply employer and employee. He probably saw her as a charity case, someone to be helped but not desired. Willa resolved to push the feelings down, to ignore them and focus on her work. But it became increasingly difficult as summer deepened, and they spent more time together. Ethan asked her to ride out with him more often, saying he enjoyed the company. They would work together during the day, then sit by the fire in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. He brought her little gifts from his trips to town, a new book or a bag of peppermints, nothing extravagant but thoughtful. And sometimes she would catch him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and wondering in his eyes. One evening in late July, a neighboring rancher named Pete Sullivan stopped by to discuss buying some of Ethan's cattle. Pete was a loud, jovial man with a large spread to the east. He accepted Ethan's invitation to stay for supper, and Willa prepared a meal while the men talked business. Pete was openly curious about Willa, asking questions that bordered on rude about how she came to work for Ethan. Ethan deflected most of them with practiced ease, but Willa could see tension building in his jaw. "You are a lucky man, Jameson," Pete said over dessert, looking at Willa with too much interest. "Good cook, pretty girl. If you ever get tired of ranch work, Miss Lane, I've got a big house that could use a woman's touch." "I am quite content where I am," Willa said coolly. "Thank you. Content for now, maybe," Pete said with a laugh. "But a woman wants security, a future. Ethan here is a good man, but he has got a small operation. Me, I have got 3 times the land, twice the cattle, could offer you a better situation." "Pete," Ethan said, his voice hard, "you are out of line." "Just making conversation," Pete said, but he held up his hands in mock surrender. No offense meant. The rest of the meal was tense, and Willa was relieved when Pete finally left. She started clearing dishes while Ethan stood at the window, his back rigid. "I apologize for his behavior," Ethan said without turning around. "Pete is a good rancher, but he has no manners when it comes to women." "It is not your fault," Willa said, "but thank you for defending me." "Always," Ethan said, and the intensity in that single word made Willa pause. He turned to face her. "You know you are not just an employee to me, right? You are my friend. I value having you here." "I value being here," Willa said, her heart beating faster. "You have given me more than just work, Ethan. You have given me a home." He crossed the room to her then, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Is that what this is to you? A home?" "Yes," Willa whispered. "Is that all right?" "It is more than all right," Ethan said. He raised his hand as if to touch her face, then hesitated. "Willa, I need to tell you something. These past few months with you here, they have been the happiest of my life. I look forward to coming home at the end of the day because I know you will be here. I think about you when I am out on the range. I find excuses to stay close to the house just to see you. What I am trying to say is that my feelings for you have become something more than friendship." Willa's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan, you do not need to say anything," he rushed on. "I know this complicates things. You work for me, you live in my house, and I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated in any way. If you do not feel the same, we can just forget I said anything and go back to how things were. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you." "You think I could forget you said that?" Willa asked, and she was surprised to find herself almost laughing. "Ethan, I have been trying so hard not to fall in love with you. I thought you just saw me as someone to help a project. I never imagined you might feel the same way I do." Hope dawned in Ethan's eyes. "The same way?" "Yes," Willa said, feeling bold. She reached up and placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her palm. "I love you, Ethan Jameson. I think I have been falling for you since the day you burned that contract and told me I could choose my own future." Ethan's hand finally completed its journey to her face, cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I loved your courage that day, standing on that platform with your head high, refusing to let them break you. You were the bravest thing I had ever seen." "I was terrified," Willa admitted. "Courage is not the absence of fear," Ethan said. "It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You have more courage than anyone I have ever met." Then he was kissing her, soft and tentative at first, asking permission. Willa answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back with all the feelings she had been suppressing for months. He tasted like coffee and sugar from the dessert, and his arms came around her waist, pulling her close. It was perfect, like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right. I want to court you properly. No rushing, no assumptions. Will you let me court you, Willa?" "Yes," Willa said, smiling so hard her face hurt. "Yes, I will." The next weeks were a revelation. Ethan courted Willa with old-fashioned determination. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows, taught her to fish in the creek, took her on long rides through the mountains to show her beautiful hidden places. They held hands by the fire in the evenings, stole kisses in the barn, and talked about everything from their pasts to their dreams for the future. Ethan was surprisingly romantic for such a practical man. He left notes for her to find, little scraps of paper with poems he had copied from books or simple statements like, "You are beautiful, and I am grateful for you every day." He asked her opinion on ranch decisions, making it clear he valued her thoughts. And he was always respectful, never pushing for more than Willa was comfortable giving for her part. Willa fell deeper in love with him every day. She loved his quiet strength, his sense of humor that emerged once he was comfortable, his unfailing integrity. She loved the way he treated the animals with patience and the way he treated her with reverence. She loved that he read poetry and could talk about philosophy, but also knew how to birth a calf and mend a fence. He was everything she had never known she wanted. One evening in September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Ethan took her hand. "Willa, I need to ask you something important." Her heart started racing. "All right. When I brought you here, I told you that you could leave whenever you wanted. That still stands. You are free always. But I am hoping you will choose to stay, not as an employee, but as something more," Ethan said. He slid off the chair and onto one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I do not have much to offer except a small ranch, a modest house, and a heart that is completely yours. But if you will have me, I promise to spend every day trying to make you happy. Willa Lane, will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire set in it. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful and clearly chosen with care. Willa felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Ethan's face split into a grin and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply while the sun set behind them. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Willa said. "You saved me, Ethan, not just that day in town, but every day since. You showed me what it means to be truly free, to make my own choices. And I choose you. I will always choose you." They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Saint Elmo. Mrs. Peterson from the general store stood as Willa's witness, and Pete Sullivan, despite his earlier inappropriate behavior, stood as Ethan's. Willa wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Peterson helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Ethan wore his best suit, his hair carefully combed back, and he could not stop smiling. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Willa with such tenderness that several people in the small congregation wiped away tears. Afterward, there was a simple reception at the church with cake and coffee, and their neighbors from the surrounding ranches came to wish them well. Silas Morton, the creditor who had tried to sell Willa, had the audacity to show up. He approached them with an oily smile. "Congratulations," he said. "I suppose things worked out well for you, Miss Lane, or should I say Mrs. Jameson now? They worked out despite your best efforts," Ethan said coldly. "You are not welcome here, Morton. Leave." "Now see here," Morton started, but Pete Sullivan stepped forward. "You heard the man. Get out before we throw you out." Morton left, muttering, and Willa squeezed Ethan's hand gratefully. "Thank you for not causing a scene." "He is not worth it," Ethan said. "This is a happy day. I will not let him ruin it." They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, now truly husband and wife. Ethan carried Willa over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room of the house that was now theirs together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jameson," he said. "I have been home since the day you brought me here," Willa said, "but this makes it official." That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion. Ethan was gentle with Willa, making sure she felt cherished and safe. And Willa gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the future stretching before them bright with possibility. The years that followed were full of hard work and deep happiness. Ethan expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land when it became available and growing the herd to over 500 head of cattle. Willa became known in the area for her garden and her cooking, often providing vegetables and preserves to neighboring families. Together, they made the ranch not just a working operation but a real home. Their first child came 2 years after they were married. Willa went into labor on a cold February morning, and Ethan rode through a snowstorm to fetch the doctor from town. He stayed by her side through the long hours of labor, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. When their son finally arrived, squalling and healthy, Ethan cried. "He is perfect," he kept saying, holding the tiny bundle with infinite care. "You are perfect." "I cannot believe this is real." They named him James Ethan Jameson, calling him Jamie. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair, and he was the light of their lives. Ethan was a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching Jamie to ride almost before he could walk. Willa watched her husband with their son and felt her heart swell with love. 2 years later, a daughter came. Rose Lily Jameson was born during a spring rainstorm, smaller than her brother but with a will of iron. She had Willa's green eyes and Ethan's determination. And from the moment she could crawl, she was following her father and brother around the ranch. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters when they lost cattle to the cold, dry summers when the grass withered and they worried about having enough hay. There were illnesses and injuries, broken bones and fevers that kept Willa up all night. But through it all, Ethan and Willa faced everything together. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan took Willa back to the hillside where he had first told her he loved her. The children were with Mrs. Peterson in town for the day, giving them rare time alone. They sat on the same spot, looking out over the valley that now held so many memories. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Staying here? Sometimes I worry that you might have wanted more than life on an isolated ranch." Willa turned to him in surprise. "More than this. Ethan, you gave me everything I could ever want. Freedom, love, family, purpose. I have never regretted a single moment. Not even the hard times," Ethan pressed. "The winters when money was tight, the times you had to make do with so little, especially not those times," Willa said firmly. "Those times showed me what we are made of. We face everything together and we survive. That is what matters." Ethan pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you more now than I did the day we married," he said. "I did not think that was possible, but every year with you makes me love you more." "I love you too," Willa said. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me too," Ethan said. "I was alone for so long I thought that was all I deserved. You showed me I was wrong. You made me believe I could have a family, a real home. Everything good in my life came from the day I decided to step forward and help someone who needed it." They sat in peaceful silence, watching the clouds drift across the sky. Then Willa said, "Do you remember what you told me that first day? You said, now you decide your own future." "I remember," Ethan said. "That was the moment everything changed," Willa said. "Not just because you bought my freedom, but because you gave me the power to choose. And I chose you. I chose this life. I chose us. That was the best decision I ever made." "It was the best decision I ever witnessed," Ethan said. "And every day since, you have chosen to stay to build this life with me. That means more than you know." As the sun began to set, they rode back to the ranch together, hand in hand. The house came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, and Willa felt the familiar swell of contentment. This was home. This was love. This was the life she had chosen, and it was perfect. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes. Jamie grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Rose developed a talent for breaking horses, and an independent streak that both delighted and worried her parents. When Jamie was 16 and Rose 14, Willa discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. Their youngest, a boy they named Thomas, came into the world healthy and happy. Ethan was 50 years old when Thomas was born, his hair now more silver than brown, but he threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he had shown with the older children. Willa, at 40, felt blessed beyond measure. She had gone from having nothing and no one to having a family that filled her heart to overflowing. One evening, when Thomas was about 5 years old, the whole family gathered around the dinner table. It had become their tradition to share one good thing from the day. Jamie talked about a new calf being born. Rose described a particularly difficult horse she had finally managed to gentle. Thomas, in his chirping little voice, said his good thing was cookies, which made everyone laugh. When it was Ethan's turn, he looked around the table at his family and said, "My good thing is all of you. Every single day my good thing is all of you." "That is cheating, Papa," Rose said with a grin. "You say that every time." "Because it is true every time," Ethan said. He reached over and took Willa's hand. "Your mother and I built this life from nothing. We came from hard places and bad situations, but we found each other, and from that, all of this grew. You three are proof that good things can come from dark times." "Tell us the story again," Thomas begged. "About how Papa saved Mama." It had become one of Thomas's favorite stories. Willa looked at Ethan and he nodded. So she told it again, the story of that terrible day in Saint Elmo when she had stood on the auction block. She told them about the tall cowboy who had paid for her freedom and then given it to her unconditionally. She told them about coming to the ranch, learning to trust again, falling in love. "And then Papa asked me to marry him," Willa finished. "And I said yes, because I knew he was the best man I would ever meet. He gave me the greatest gift anyone can give another person. He gave me the freedom to choose my own life." "And you chose us," Thomas said happily. "I chose your father," Willa corrected gently. "But yes, in choosing him I got all of you. And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." After the children were in bed, Ethan and Willa sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky. "Do you think they understand?" Ethan asked. "What we went through to get here?" "They will," Willa said. "Maybe not now, but someday. When they face their own hard times, they will remember that their parents survived worse. They will know that love and determination can overcome almost anything." "I hope they never face what we did," Ethan said quietly. "I hope so too," Willa agreed. "But if they do, we have given them the tools to survive it. We have shown them what real love looks like, what real partnership means. That is the best gift we can give them." Ethan pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence. The ranch was quiet around them, just the sound of the wind in the pines and the distant call of an owl. It was peaceful in a way that still sometimes surprised Willa. After so much turmoil in her early life, she had found a peace that ran bone deep. "I am proud of us," Ethan said eventually. "We have built something good here, something that will last." "We have," Willa agreed. "And it started with your courage. You could have walked by that day. You could have ignored what was happening, but you stepped forward and did the right thing, even though it cost you. That choice changed both our lives." "Best $500 I ever spent," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Best choice I ever made, saying yes to coming here," Willa countered. They sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life worth living. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain as always, but they would face it together as they had faced everything. With love, with courage, and with the unshakable knowledge that they had chosen each other, and that choice had made all the difference. As the years continued their steady march, the ranch prospered beyond what Ethan and Willa had dared to hope. Jamie eventually took over more of the daily operations, proving himself a capable and innovative rancher. Rose, despite her father's initial worries, married a neighboring rancher's son who was gentle and kind, and together they started their own small spread adjacent to the Jameson property. Thomas, the surprise baby, showed a talent for working with leather and set up a small workshop on the ranch, making saddles and tack that became sought after throughout Colorado. Ethan and Willa became grandparents when Jamie married a schoolteacher from Saint Elmo named Clara. Their first grandchild, a girl named Willa after her grandmother, arrived on a beautiful spring morning. When Ethan held his granddaughter for the first time, Willa saw tears in his eyes. "I never thought I would have this," he said softly. "A family this big, this happy. When I was 16 and working on that railroad crew, I thought I would die young and alone. But look at this. Look at what we made." "We made it together," Willa reminded him, putting her arm around his waist. "Everything we have, we built together." Rose soon followed with children of her own, and Thomas eventually married a quiet girl from town who loved books as much as he loved leather. The ranch became a gathering place for the growing family, especially on holidays when everyone would come together. The old house had been expanded over the years to accommodate the crowd, with an addition for the dining room and extra bedrooms for visitors. On Ethan and Willa's 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a surprise party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. Mrs. Peterson, now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack, made the journey from town. Even Pete Sullivan came, bringing his wife and joking that he never had a chance with Willa anyway, since Ethan had claimed her heart from the start. At one point during the celebration, Ethan pulled Willa aside to the quiet of the porch. The party continued inside without them, laughter and music spilling out into the night. 25 years, Ethan said, shaking his head in wonder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we got married, and sometimes it feels like you have been with me forever." "I know what you mean," Willa said. "I can barely remember what my life was like before you. It seems like a different person entirely." "It was a different person," Ethan said. "We have both grown and changed so much, but the core of who we are, that has stayed the same. You are still the bravest woman I know, and I am still the luckiest man alive." "I am pretty lucky myself," Willa said, smiling up at him. In the lantern light, she could see the lines on his face, the silver in his hair, but he was still her Ethan, still the man who had saved her and loved her and built a life with her. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one," Ethan said firmly. "Every choice I made led me here to you, to this life. How could I regret any of that?" "What about the $500? Willa teased. "You could have bought a lot of cattle with that money." "Best investment I ever made," Ethan said, pulling her close. "That money bought your freedom, and your freedom led to my happiness. I would pay it 100 times over for the life we have had together." Inside, someone called for them to cut the cake. Ethan and Willa returned to the party, hand in hand as always. They were surrounded by their children and grandchildren, by friends who had become family. As they cut the cake together, Willa looked around at all the faces and felt overwhelming gratitude. This was what freedom had given her. Not just the absence of debt or servitude, but the ability to build exactly the life she wanted. She had chosen Ethan, chosen the ranch, chosen to stay and work and love and create this beautiful, messy, wonderful family. Every day had been a choice, and every day she had chosen this life. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Ethan and Willa took a final walk around the ranch under the stars. They walked past the barn where they had shared their first kiss, past the garden that Willa had brought back to life all those years ago, past the corral where Ethan had taught her to ride. "I want you to know something," Ethan said as they paused by the fence, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "That day in Saint Elmo, when I stepped forward to bid on your contract, I told myself I was just doing the right thing, just helping someone who needed it. But I think maybe I knew even then. When I looked at you standing there so brave and defiant, something in my soul recognized something in yours." "Do you believe in fate?" Willa asked. "I believe in choice," Ethan said. "But I also believe that sometimes the universe puts people in each other's paths. What they do with that opportunity is up to them. We were given a chance and we took it. We chose each other and we kept choosing each other every day after that. I will keep choosing you," Willa promised. "For as long as I live. And I will keep choosing you," Ethan said. "You are my heart, Willa, my home, my everything." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other when they both needed saving. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful and prosperous. It was a far cry from that dusty day in Saint Elmo when Willa had stood on an auction block, and Ethan had stepped forward to change both their lives. As they walked back to the house, Willa thought about all the years that had passed. She thought about the girl she had been, desperate and alone, and the woman she had become. She thought about the lonely cowboy who had saved her and the devoted husband and father he had become. They had grown together, changed together, built a life together from absolutely nothing. And it had all started with one act of courage and kindness. Ethan had paid for her freedom and told her to decide her own future. She had decided on him, on them, on this life. And every day since, that decision had proven to be the right one. Inside the house, they checked on the grandchildren who were staying over, all sleeping peacefully in their beds. Then they retired to their own room, the same room Ethan had given to Willa that first day as a guest room, now theirs together. They got ready for bed with the comfortable ease of long marriage, and when they climbed under the quilts, Ethan pulled Willa close. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you to the end." "I love you too," Willa said, settling into the warmth of his embrace. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me too," Ethan said, as he always did. "We saved each other." And in the quiet darkness of their room, surrounded by the life they had built together, Ethan and Willa fell asleep. Outside, the mountains stood eternal watch over the ranch. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. The garden waited for morning sun to coax its plants toward growth. And the stars wheeled slowly across the vast Colorado sky, bearing witness to a love that had started with an act of kindness and grown into something beautiful and enduring. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Winter snows gave way to spring flowers. Summer heat faded into autumn colors. And through it all, Ethan and Willa remained constant, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. As they grew older, they spent more time on the porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played. They told stories about the old days, about how they met and fell in love. And when the grandchildren asked how to know if someone was the right person to marry, Ethan and Willa always gave the same answer. "Choose someone who makes you free," Willa would say. "Someone who sees you for who you really are and loves that person. Someone who gives you the space to grow and change while standing by your side through it all. Choose someone kind," Ethan would add. "Kindness matters more than anything else. Someone who is kind to you, kind to others, kind even when it is difficult. Build your life with someone kind and you will never go wrong. And choose someone you want to sit with on the porch when you are old," Willa would finish with a smile, squeezing Ethan's hand. Because those quiet moments together are what life is really about. The grandchildren would nod seriously, storing away this wisdom for future use. And Ethan and Willa would exchange a look, remembering the journey that had brought them here. From an auction block to a porch swing, from strangers to soulmates, from nothing to everything, time passed as it always does. Ethan reached his 60th year, then his 65th. Willa followed close behind. Their bodies grew slower, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with age, like good wine maturing in a barrel. They knew each other so completely that words were often unnecessary. A glance, a touch, a smile was enough to communicate volumes. On a particularly beautiful summer evening, when Ethan was 68 and Willa 66, they sat on their porch as the sun set behind the mountains. The ranch was running smoothly under Jamie's management. Rose and her family were thriving on their adjacent spread. Thomas's saddle shop had become successful enough that he was training apprentices. The grandchildren were growing up strong and healthy, some already starting families of their own. "We did good, did we not?" Willa said, breaking the comfortable silence. "We did better than good," Ethan said. "We did extraordinary. I was thinking today about that moment when you told me I could decide my own future," Willa said. "Do you remember?" "I remember everything about that day," Ethan said. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen. I remember feeling angry that the world had put you in that position. And I remember feeling absolutely certain that I had to help you, even though I did not know why at the time." "I think you knew," Willa said. "Maybe not consciously, but some part of you recognized me. The same way some part of me recognized you. We were meant to find each other." "I am glad we did," Ethan said simply. "These years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. I wake up every morning grateful that you chose to stay, that you chose me." "I am grateful too," Willa said. "You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. Love, family, purpose, home. You gave me myself, really. The chance to become who I was meant to be." They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The mountains stood eternal as they had for millions of years and would for millions more. But this moment, right now, was theirs alone. "Promise me something," Ethan said eventually. "Anything," Willa said. "If I go first, promise me you will not spend your days grieving." "Live, Willa. Keep choosing life and joy. That is what I would want for you." "Only if you promise the same," Willa said, her throat tight. "If I go first, you keep living, keep choosing happiness. Do not let grief consume you." "I promise," Ethan said, "though I cannot imagine this world without you in it." "We will cross that bridge when we come to it," Willa said. "For now, we have this moment, we have right now, and right now is perfect." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "Yes, it is." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they went inside together. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the accumulated memories of decades. They prepared for bed with the ease of long practice, and when they lay down together, Ethan wrapped his arms around Willa as he had done thousands of times before. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," Willa whispered back. "Always and forever." They fell asleep holding each other, two people who had found their way through darkness to light, from loneliness to love, from despair to hope. Their story was written in the land they had tended, the family they had raised, the life they had built together. It was a story of courage and kindness, of choosing love even when love seemed impossible. And it was a story that would continue, passed down through generations. Their grandchildren would tell their children, and those children would tell their children about the day a brave woman stood on an auction block and a courageous cowboy stepped forward to save her. About how he burned the contract and told her to decide her own future. About how she chose him and he chose her, and together they built something beautiful. The ranch would endure, passed down through the family, a testament to what could be built when two people committed to each other completely. The mountains would stand watch over it all, unchanging and eternal. And somewhere in the starlight and the wind and the very soil of the land, Ethan and Willa's love would remain, an invisible but indestructible foundation upon which everything else rested. Years continued to pass. Ethan and Willa celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th, then their 40th. Each year was a gift, each day a blessing. They slowed down physically, but their minds remained sharp, and their love remained strong. They spent more time sitting and talking, reminiscing about their years together, making plans for the family's future. On their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered again. There were now great-grandchildren running around, filling the house with noise and laughter. Ethan sat in his favorite chair, a great-granddaughter on his lap, and watched the chaos with contentment. Willa came to sit beside him, and he reached for her hand automatically. After 40 years, holding her hand was as natural as breathing. "Look at all of this," he said softly. "Look at what came from that one day, that one choice. From your courage," Willa said. "Your willingness to step forward and do the right thing even though it cost you." "Our courage," Ethan corrected. "You had to be brave enough to trust me, to come to the ranch, to take a chance on building a new life. This is not just because of what I did. This is because of what we did together." "Together," Willa agreed, squeezing his hand. "Everything worth doing we did together." As the party continued around them, Ethan reflected on the journey they had taken. From that dusty street in Saint Elmo to this moment, surrounded by family and love. It had not always been easy. There had been struggles and hardships, times when money was tight and the future uncertain. There had been losses too. Friends who had passed away, hard winters that took cattle, the inevitable sorrows that came with a long life, but through it all they had each other. That had made the difference, knowing that whatever came they would face it together. That whatever happened they had each other's backs, that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. "No regrets?" Willa asked, echoing the question from years past. "Not one," Ethan said firmly. "How about you?" "My only regret is that we could not start sooner," Willa said with a smile. "That I did not meet you when we were both 18 and have even more years together." "We got the years we got," Ethan said. "And I am grateful for every single one of them. Every day with you has been a gift." A photographer had been hired for the occasion, and he gathered everyone for a family portrait. It took several minutes to organize everyone, with children wiggling and adults jockeying for position. Finally, they were all arranged with Ethan and Willa in the center, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren arrayed around them like branches of a tree growing from a strong trunk. "Everyone smile," the photographer called. "This is a picture for the ages." As the flash powder went off, capturing that moment forever, Ethan looked at Willa and saw her smiling, truly happy. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but to him she was still the beautiful woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Still brave, still strong, still the best decision he had ever made. The party continued late into the evening. When the last guests had finally left or gone to bed, Ethan and Willa took one final walk around the ranch. It was summer, warm and peaceful, with crickets singing in the grass and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. They walked slowly, Ethan's arm around Willa's waist to steady her, Willa's hand resting on his arm. They did not need to talk. After 40 years together, silence was comfortable, natural. They walked past all the familiar places, each one holding memories. The barn where they had shared countless kisses. The garden that Willa had tended for decades. The corral where Ethan had taught first Willa, then their children, then their grandchildren to ride. Finally, they stopped at the fence overlooking the valley, the same spot where Ethan had first confessed his love. The moon was bright overhead, illuminating the landscape in silver light. "You remember the first time we stood here together?" Ethan asked. "When I told you I loved you." "I remember being terrified," Willa admitted. "Terrified that you did not really mean it or that something would ruin it. I had never had anything good in my life. I did not trust it to last." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I know that real love does last," Willa said. "Not because it is always easy, but because two people choose to make it last. We chose this, Ethan. Every day we chose us. That is why it lasted." "I would choose you again," Ethan said. "In any lifetime, in any circumstance, if I had the choice, I would always choose you." "And I would always choose you," Willa said. She turned to him, looking up at his face in the moonlight. "You are the best man I have ever known. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for letting me love you," Ethan said, "for loving me back, for building this life with me." He bent and kissed her, tender and sweet. After 40 years, kissing her still made his heart race. She was still his miracle, still the woman who had changed his life simply by choosing to stay. They returned to the house and prepared for bed one more time. As they lay together in the darkness, Ethan held Willa close and thanked whatever force had brought them together. Whether it was fate or chance or divine intervention, he was grateful for every moment. "I love you, Willa Jameson," he whispered. "I love you, Ethan Jameson," she whispered back. And as they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside continued its eternal dance. The stars wheeled overhead. The mountains stood guard. The ranch slept peacefully. And in a small bedroom in a log house in the Colorado mountains, two people who had found each other against all odds rested in the perfect peace of true and lasting love. Their story had begun with an act of courage and kindness. It had continued through hard work and dedication. And it would end someday, as all stories must. But the love they had built together, the family they had created, the life they had lived would endure long after they were gone. It would live on in the hearts of their children and grandchildren. It would live on in the land they had tended and the house they had built. It would live on in the very mountains that had sheltered them all these years, because that is the nature of real love. It does not end when life ends. It transforms into something larger, something that becomes part of the fabric of the world. Ethan and Willa's love would endure in stories told around dinner tables, in the values passed down through generations, in the example they had set of what it meant to truly love another person. And so the story ends where it began, with a choice. Ethan chose to step forward and save a stranger. Willa chose to trust him, to build a life with him. And together, day by day, year by year, they chose to love each other. That choice, repeated over and over, became a life. And that life became a legacy. The cowboy had paid for her freedom. He had told her to decide her own future, and she had decided on love, on family, on him. That decision had made all the difference. It had transformed two broken people into something whole and beautiful. It had created a family from nothing. It had built a home in the wilderness. It had proved that even in the hardest times, even in the darkest moments, love could prevail. Years later, when both Ethan and Willa had passed on, their story would still be told. Their great-grandchildren would tell their children about the day Grandpa Ethan saved Grandma Willa from the auction block. They would tell how he burned the contract and set her free. They would tell how she chose to stay, how they fell in love, how they built the ranch that still stood in the mountains. And those children would grow up knowing that their family was founded on courage and kindness, on choice and love. The ranch house still stands, maintained by generation after generation of Jamesons. The mountains still watch over the valley. And if you visit on a quiet evening when the sun is setting and the stars are just beginning to appear, you might almost hear the echo of two voices on the porch, talking quietly about the life they built together. You might almost feel the presence of two souls who loved each other so completely that their love became permanent, etched into the very land they called home. That is the power of love. That is the legacy of choice. That is the story of Willa and Ethan Jameson, who found each other in the worst of circumstances and created the best of lives. He was a cowboy who stepped forward when others turned away. She was a woman who chose freedom and found love. Together, they proved that one act of courage, one moment of kindness, can change everything. And they lived happily ever after, not because their life was perfect, but because they faced everything together, with love as their compass and each other as their constant companions. From that terrible day on an auction block to a lifetime of love on a mountain ranch, their story became legend. And their love, chosen freely and maintained faithfully, endured forever.